From the Free Press, this is Honestly, live in DC, and I'm Barry Weiss. At the risk of totally grossing out all three of you and everyone in this room, I have a few confessions to make. I have a plastic cutting board in my kitchen, which my wife regards as like the devil's work. I have had my forehead injected with chemicals to make me look younger. I drink pasteurized milk. I do drink Diet Coke, which my producer calls cancer water, and I could go on, but I do not want to lose my audience. Now, all of those things, until very recently, seemed perfectly normal in American life. Now they seem not just low status and not just outdated, but perhaps clinically insane. And that is because of the cultural sea change that we have seen over the last few years, and especially, of course, over the last few months. And we've seen this because this very unexpected coalition of nutritionists, longevity experts, wellness influencers, holistic and functional medicine doctors, moms wearing babies and no deodorant, mushroom shamans, and yes, some vaccine skeptics, and we'll get to them, who have all gathered together under the banner of MAHA. Now, a decade ago, if I listed off that group of personas to you, you would think 100% they are liberal, they are progressive. Maybe they're off the political map on the left. But here we are in 2025, and not only has this group helped usher in Donald Trump to power, I think you can make an argument that the MAHA movement is perhaps the most powerful political force in American life. So what does that movement stand for? What does it look like when it actually marries itself to power as the 47th president, becomes the 47th president? And what will MAHA actually be able to accomplish over these next 4 years? And I cannot think of anyone better to talk about this with on the tiniest stage ever known to man with the following people: Calley, Jillian, Michaels, and Vani. Hari, guys, thank you so much for being here. You have incredible bios. People should go online and read all about you and follow you on all the social platforms. But Calley, who's been on the podcast before, is the founder of TrueMed. He is also the co-author of Good Energy, which he wrote with his sister, Casey Means. Jillian is America's original fitness expert, in my view. She's extremely subtle. You never know what she thinks about anything. She is the author of 9 books, I believe. And as I was telling her in the green room, if you are trying to get a bridal body, the best thing you can do other than Ozempic is her 30-day shred. I absolutely swear by it.
Other than Ozempic.
I have been influenced by you.
Right next to me, like okay. Just within striking distance.
Okay, we will. I'm going to get hit in the face. I'm going to get hit in the face. And Vani is the founder of True Vani. You might also know her from her writings as Food Babe. She has more than 2 million followers on Instagram. And you may remember her as the woman that got Subway to remove, tell me the name of the chemical.
Azodicarbonamide.
Exactly, otherwise known as the yoga mat chemical from its breads. The idea that there was a yoga mat chemical in a bread is kind of the whole purpose of this conversation. So Calley, Jillian, Vani, thank you so much for being here. Okay, so I want to kind of start with the politics of it, okay? The crunchy alternative medicine people who are skeptical of big pharma and big food, who are skeptical of vaccines and the rest, they used to be, as I was mentioning in the introduction, starkly on the left. RFK Jr., the beacon of the MAHA movement, he was a lifelong Democrat. Now this group has found their home on the right. Explain, Calley, in a concise way, because it could be a very long answer. How did we get to this strange political realignment?
Donald Trump is the reason. In 2016, I was never Trumper. And I was kind of the traditional Republican. I interned and worked for George W. Bush at the Heritage Foundation. And back then you learned that good conservatives don't question American institutions, particularly corporations. The pharmaceutical industry can do no wrong. Big food can do no wrong. We're shipping our agriculture and pharmaceutical innovation around the world. And I was a little nervous in 2016. I think a lot of people were, when President Trump was calling, for basically calling out corporations, calling out the corporate cronyism. And I think what I think a lot of people learned is that his theory was right. The American people are being brought down by crony capitalism. And you look across the board, the military-industrial complex is making us less secure. The education-industrial complex is making our kids less educated. And there's this healthcare industrial complex. 43% of the US economy profits from either drugging kids or poisoning them, in my opinion. I mean, fundamentally, in the United States, we have a situation where 38% of kids are pre-diabetic, where 50% of teens are overweight or obese, but it's 3% in Japan. And then we have the healthcare industry that instead of calling out why that's happening, which is clearly because of our ultra-processed food, because we're so sedentary in U.S. schools, kids spend less time outside than a maximum security prison. The fact that we have chronic stress off the charts, these fundamental factors aren't being called out. The medical system is, in fact, just watching it happening, profiting. I mean, 95% of medical spending is intervening after someone gets sick. And I think where the politics came together here is that these issues, and I agree with you, at a Trump rally and with Bobby, if you closed your eyes, you'd think you're at a Berkeley seminar, a left-wing seminar. But it
like as you're talking about the military-industrial, I'm like, are you Noam Chomsky, or are you like?
What Donald Trump did is actually, reframe conservatism, that the American people want to thrive, but there's corrupt institutions in the way. That I think the foundation of Donald Trump's candidacy and his reason for existence is standing in the way of the swamp, corruption. He's redefined a vision. I think it's a perfect vision for our time, because the defining issue in the world right now, in the developed world, is people crying out this populist uprising. And Donald Trump channeled that. He channeled a vision of standing up against corruption. And what happened is there's nothing more representative of the swamp than what's happening to kids, than industries profiting from kids. And in my opinion, Bobby Kennedy was the most MAGA candidate other than Donald Trump. And what's happening to health is actually a case study of the foundation of Donald Trump's candidacy. So them blending together, it was just another proof point of MAGA. MAHA is a proof point of MAGA. There's corrupt institutions that are profiting from suboptimal outcomes, and they were able to combine and unleash this pent-up frustration of moms. And I think it's parent that Vani has channeled.
Well, let's talk about the moms, because 30 years ago, you remember when it was Clinton v. Dole, soccer moms were the thing, right? That was the most, it was soccer moms that swayed the election, suburban moms that wanted common sense, pragmatism, of course, like James Carville's famous line, it's the economy, stupid. And they found that in the person of Bill Clinton. Now I think you can argue that the new soccer mom is the MAHA mom. And Vani, I feel like you exemplify that, you channel it, you are the tiger mom of the MAHA mom movement. Explain, give us a sense of that world, and are these women particularly political? Have they become political because of seeing what's going on with their kids? Give us a bit of a picture of that world.
I mean, they're fed up. They're fed up with the mass poisoning of our food system. They see that American companies are using better, safer ingredients in other products overseas while selling the same version of their product here with more toxic, more poisonous ingredients, everything from Kellogg's cereal and General Mills Lucky Charms to Coca-Cola products and PepsiCo and chips. And they see the side-by-side graphics that are going viral in their groups online, and they're fed up. And they're just dying for some healthy food for their children, right? They just want to hold someone accountable. They not only care about their own health, but they're willing to go to bat. They're willing to call corporations. They're willing to show up at the headquarters. I mean, when I was met with, and Calley was there, it was incredible. 1,000 people on the ground in Battle Creek, Michigan, to deliver 400,000 signatures to Kellogg's headquarters. I've never seen that kind of movement on the ground, especially in a little town like Battle Creek, Michigan, that there's no direct flights, really. You have to really get there.
I have no idea where it is.
Exactly.
Where is it?
I mean, it's like an hour and a half south from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So 2 hours from Detroit. But again, this is pent-up frustration about the fact that our kids are suffering more than ever. 38% of preteens, the ages between 12 and 18, are going to be pre-diabetic. That's unacceptable. In Japan, it's like 3% are obese, right? It's insane that the stark differences between us and other countries, and we see it right now with our moms looking for answers. We don't want to medicate our kids. We don't want to have to put them on ADHD medication, but our schools are serving them Fruit Loops. We've got to do something different.
Let's rewind back the clock to 2016. Jillian, you said a lot of colorful things about Donald Trump. You were not a fan, suffice it to say. And the reason that I think there's a natural transition to that is because in 2016, one of the things that I think kept a lot of people who were maybe attracted to some of Donald Trump's policies from voting for him was the way that he was going to course in American life. And a lot of moms, frankly, who heard him on that tape talking about grabbing women by the pussy, saw the way that he talked about women and thought to themselves, hold on, everything is downstream of character. If the president is meant to be the most powerful person in the world, the person that our children are meant to look up to, sorry, I can't hold my nose and vote for him. And now you've seen this pretty big sea change over the past 8 years, where arguably some of the women, moms, who didn't want to vote for him, I guess now are holding their nose and doing so. And Jillian, I feel like you kind of might be one of them, and forgive me if I'm caricaturing.
No, you're not at all. If we could actually go back a little bit further, to before these two had come onto the scene, my very first podcast, I want to say 12, 13 years ago, was with Maria Rodale about her book, The Organic Manifesto, which was espousing like getting back to nature, eating real food. It went on deaf ears. And there was Mark Bittman and Michael Pollan, and none of it was political. None of it. And it went nowhere.
Yeah.
And this is where having an individual like Calley and an individual like Vani who have made it political, this is the first time you're starting to see change. And I was not political. I voted on social issues. The world was good enough. I wanted gay marriage. I wanted equality. I mean, I was a liberal. I was born in California. I was blue through and through, and health was nonpartisan. And then when these two started convincing politicians to take a position on it, I started to see change for the first time in my 20-year career. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? How is this possible? And I reached out to Calley and I was like, what can I do to be helpful? I need to have you on my podcast immediately, educate everybody. And he kind of brought me along. And then other things began to happen. You started to see censorship become an issue around health. And you started to see, I mean, this is somewhat unrelated, but sex changes for children. Like, no one's mentioning that our current director of HHS wanted to remove all age limits for sex changes for kids. Like, what the fuck is going on? You know, these kinds of things started to make me more political. And yes, now when I weigh the pros and cons of each side, I find the positions on the left are so radical and so dangerous. And we had hoped they would take a stand on the health issue. And in fact, Calley told me, like, listen, we're gonna talk to anybody. Like, you don't need to be a Trumper. We're talking to everybody. And guess what? The left talked to nobody. They refused to sit down with RFK. And that was so offensive to me personally. And that was the last straw for me.
This is one of the reasons why you saw Red 3 just being banned this week. The White House was holding it. They wouldn't do it during the election. They didn't want to bring this issue to light. And somebody was actually holding.
We're talking about a food dye that the FDA sort of just banned.
The Biden administration
That's right.
rushing before Trump, days before Trump gets in.
Just rushing to get it in.
And it's been banned in Europe for a long time.
But no, it's been banned in cosmetics here for 35 years.
But not in our food.
Correct. So you can't use it in lipstick.
40 years ago that it causes cancer.
Yeah, yes. And this is something they've known about. It's been petitioned by every single nonprofit organization, showed them the data, showed them the science that it causes thyroid cancer in rats. And under the Delaney cause, it is law that this chemical cannot be in our food supply. Why were they holding it back? I mean, because of political reasons. This is what's made me political, because I think it's absolutely insane that we are harming our human life in America this way.
So for people that are not familiar with you guys, which, you know, in this room, I know that's not the case, but for people watching, give us just a little bit of a sense of how you became passionate about these issues. I know, Calley, for you, it was your mom and her cancer and how quickly, and the effect of that you and your sister feel food and diet and environment had on her. What about each of you?
Yeah, I grew up with two immigrant Indian parents, and they had an arranged marriage. And my dad had been living here for several years to go to school, and he married my mom. You know, met her 5 days later, brought her to the United States. She lived here for the rest of her life, and he says, you know, if we're going to be Americans, we're going to eat like Americans. And here is a McDonald's hamburger, and that is how I was raised. Fast food, processed food, and as a result, I was in and out of the doctor's offices most of my life. And it was not until my early 20s on 9 prescription drugs, overweight, in the hospital, getting an organ taken out of my body, that I woke up and said, something's not right. I need to look into this. And I channeled this energy that I learned in high school on how to debate and how to research. Back then we didn't have Google. So I went to the library, checked out big books on nutrition. And there was this concept in one of them that just hit me on the head. And it was that the majority of foods on the grocery store shelves are dead. And I said, that's how I felt for most of my life. How do I eat live food? How do I eat real food? And when I switched my diet, I went off 9 prescription drugs, never had a diet again, lost all the weight, started to live a life that I never thought was possible, so dramatic that the friends and the family and everyone around me that saw me grow up in this miserable position said, I want to have what you're having. And so I started a blog. And before starting the blog, I was never on social media because I thought I wanted to run for office one day. And
that's definitely happening.
I was going to say that day is probably coming.
Well, I was scared to put anything personal online at that point. And so then I was like, okay, well, everyone's like, you have to join Facebook because no one's going to read your blog. Otherwise, that's how we share everything. And I'm like, okay, I'll join Facebook. And I wanted to call it eathealthyliveforever.com. My husband, who's a tech geek in the family, thought that was a stupid name and says, how about Food Babe? It's available $10 on auction. And I said, okay, well, I didn't feel like a food babe for most of my life, but why don't I teach other people to become a food babe? And I kind of hid behind this persona because I was still working in the corporate world, working for C-level executives at big banks. And I had this other passion to teach people the truth about what was happening in the food industry. And when I started to uncover the ingredients behind these popular food products, fast food, et cetera, and release them on the blog for the first time, really, for anyone to see online, that is when this awakening started, where people were like, what? I'm eating 100 chemicals in a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich? What is going on, right? And it was that led me to changing several billion-dollar corporations for the better. But then I had kids, right? I had kids and I had to make a shift. And so I decided to change the food industry from the inside and start my own company, True Vani. But then Calley called. And Calley's
really like the nexus.
No, actually, what the truth is, I saw Calley talking about all of the issues that I felt so deeply about for most of my life and that I've fought for, and he was saying it in a new way that I was energized and it was electric. And I reached out to him. We should find the Instagram post or the DM that I sent him. I said, I want to just connect with you. I had no interest in getting into any of this. I said, I just want to connect to you. And we talked on the phone, I don't know, 20 minutes. We connected. And a week later, we're taking on Kellogg's. So it was meant to be. And I have to tell you, he has literally ignited my passion again for taking on the food industry. And I'm so happy for it because I think this is our time. This is a new age. I mean, the movement is literally unstoppable. We are all coming together. It's a bipartisan issue now where you see in California, they just banned artificial food dyes in schools. It was a unanimous decision. All Democrats, all Republicans coming together. You see in the Bernie Sanders hearing where he questioned the FDA, Senator Tuberville coming at Red 3 so hard, like it took everybody.
Most conservative, most liberal.
Right. I mean, just coming together to take on these issues to get it done. And it's because we're all working together. And it's amazing what can happen when we do that.
I mean, to get political for a second, I think it is political malpractice that the left gave up the issue of protecting kids. I mean, it's just wild that they let this issue be a jump ball. And it really is.
Why did they do that?
I think it's Trump derangement syndrome. Honestly,
I don't.
What do you think, Jillian?
I don't think so. I think you're being very kind here.
The deification of the experts during COVID, because Trump was not for the experts, and the deification of Fauci has led the left for a completely, you never would have predicted this 10 years ago, to be the party of ultra-processed food and be the party of pharmaceuticals. And what was so striking to me 2 years ago is like some of the most resonant podcasts you were doing. Joe Rogan, I hear he's some kind of misinformation crazy person. I listened to him during COVID. He's talking about being healthy. He's talking about metabolic health. The top books in the country, everyone's listening to Jillian, following Vani. It's like there was this, when Americans were left to their own devices, when there was independent press and independent media, not the corporate controlled media, which is 50% funded by pharma, Americans are flocking to how can I get healthier, how can my kids get healthier, but it wasn't being talked about on the political stage by the two major parties. Then Bobby Kennedy comes and was getting 20% of the vote. This person who wasn't even allowed on mainstream media was said is totally crazy. So there was this.
So it's like the Democrats have allowed themselves to become the party of expertise, even when those experts have proven themselves to be corrupt. And I don't even want to call it.
That's the key word, corrupt. It's a money game. So when you're taking money, massive campaign donations from big food, big pharma, big insurance, big ag, of course you're going to toe that line without question.
I guess I want to push back on that just for a second, because both parties take money from big pharma and big ag. We were looking on Open Secret in preparation for this conversation. If you look at 2023 and 2024, PACs created by massive food and beverage players. Coca-Cola, I know you want to jump in, Calley. Hold on.
No.
Coca-Cola, Hershey's, Wendy's, McDonald's, all of it. They donated more to Republicans than to Democrats.
Well, I was just going to jump in and say, please don't bring facts into our arguments here. We're trying to make.
But you're being.
This is a vibes conversation. No, but I'm just saying, if you're like, if the story is really money corrupts and we got to follow the money flows in both directions toward both parties.
But did it flow to Bobby Kennedy? Did they pay off Bobby Kennedy? Because Calley worked with Bobby to put a spotlight on this issue. And then Trump, being intelligent as hell, realized that this was going to be a matter of capturing those people in the middle, grabbed Bobby and said, I'm willing to do this. He's also a billionaire. This is his last term. He's not beholden to these big companies. I mean, he's a deal maker. That's obvious. And I'm sure he's going to negotiate ways for everybody to coexist. Nevertheless, I'm pretty confident that Bobby didn't take money from these people. Trump saw an opportunity to capture all of us and bring us into the fold. And then to everybody else, it's like, okay, well, are you in or are you out?
Oh, no, as pure strategy, what Trump did is amazing. But we all know that his body is 99% composed of Big Macs. So, what does it mean to be...
But is he beholden to McDonald's financially?
A couple of things. You had a unique situation with the president. The health had to be a presidential level opportunity. And I think, when looking at Donald Trump, I don't think there's been a candidate in our lifetimes that's been less beholden to special interests. I mean, I think he raised 4 times less money than Kamala. It's been all earned media. So you certainly have a president here who's willing to tell special interests, particularly pharma, which, totally screwed him last time and he had no love for. He's willing to listen to everybody but tell them to screw off. When you get to...
But you'd agree that it's strange bedfellows to, like, when you see the picture of Bobby Kennedy, I think, being hazed on Air Force One and being forced to, like, down those seed oil fries, you're just like, this is weird.
I got to push back. I really do believe this. I've thought about this a lot. Yes,
by the way, I love those fries. I know Jillian's horrified. Jillian's so horrified by me.
So yes, Donald.
You're going to intervention on me, and I welcome it.
He eats Big Macs, but the health issue, and I think what they so effectively framed, it's not about lecturing people what to eat.
Right.
It's a matter of corruption, and I do think viscerally, President Trump felt connected to how Bobby brought him along on this issue about the corruption that is impacting kids. I mean, take the USDA nutrition guidelines. 19 out of 20 people who make our guidelines for our kids are paid for by the food or pharma industry. President Biden put a 400-page document together that said ultra-processed food is healthy for kids, that says 2-year-old skinny dad and sugar. That's being plopped on Trump's desk. We just have rank corruption. So although President Trump might enjoy a Big Mac once in a while, the foundation of his candidacy is taking on corruption. And I think that's where they connected. And I think when President Trump, the rally with Bobby, when Bobby came out and endorsed him, and President Trump said very emotionally, we're going to figure out why kids are getting so sick and take on the corruption of the FDA, CDC, and NIH. He meant that with all of his heart, and there was an eruption from the crowd. So I do agree, and I think we got to separate that, his personal habits. And the question
no
of
one's
whether,
trying to take away McDonald's French fries. Like, that's not the purpose of the MAHA movement. McDonald's French fries in the UK only have 3 ingredients. Okay, and salt is optional.
Right? Why? Okay, why?
Because because
corruption, money, like
Money.
No, but why are the
Money.
steel man the other side for me? Why is it in the interest of McDonald's America to have? I know that you guys know this chapter and verse, to have so many of these ingredients.
Shelf life palatability equals margin. Period. And I'll let you speak to the cereal conversation. Why is it glow in the dark, Vani?
Well, I mean, so in focus groups, they found out that children eat more of that product than the lesser bright version, right? So this is from when we think the obesity epidemic, when we think about the fact that they're all getting pre-diabetes, we need to step in here. I mean, how do we stand a chance if PepsiCo has a robot that mimics human taste buds and engineering our food so that we cannot stop eating it? How does the human population stand a chance against that? Right? Unless we step in and do something from a regulation standpoint or from a fairness standpoint to our human health. And, when we look at these ingredients that remain in our food supply and how there's over 10,000 here in the United States, where only there's close to 400 approved in Europe. When we see the stark differences and we see how our government has allowed this loophole to continue where food companies approve the chemicals themselves, create the chemicals to improve their bottom line, and then they end up in our food supply because it makes them more money. And when you look at nutrition labels and you look at ingredient labels and you see all of those chemical names, they're not there for a nutritional purpose. And this is one of the most fundamental things the human, every human should know, is that if you don't recognize an ingredient and you don't see it as something you would find in nature, it's not there to improve nutrition. It's there to improve the bottom line of the food industry. And when you opt out of that science experiment, you start to realize a level of health that you never thought was possible, and you start to get off all the pharmaceuticals. You start to lose the weight. You start to feel better in a way that is incredible. And that's where you find your brain start working again. And then you find your calling and you're not depressed anymore. And you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in this world.
I want what you're having. I'm like.
Well, I think this, Vani's talking about, I think we hit that in that vein in the campaign. There's really a spiritual issue here. We're really, I think, tapping human capital down in the country because of this. Just to add on to what your question of why, it's because drugs are a good business model. I always go to the fact, and what Casey and I try to do is just go to the facts. Let's not get into this conspiracy. The fact of the matter is the cigarette industry bought up the ultra-processed food industry in the 1990s, and 50% of the U.S. food supply was from Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds. They bought up when the smoking rates went down. They had massive balance sheets, and the two largest M&A deals in world history up until 1990 were cigarette companies buying food companies. And they strategically moved thousands of scientists from the cigarette department to the food department. And then they moved their lobbyists over and lobbied for the food pyramid, which was an ultra-processed food marketing document. As you know, we listened to scientific experts. And when the food pyramid came out, we shifted our consumption from fats, healthy fats and things like that, to carbs. 20% carb increase in the US diet 10 years after the food pyramid. So that was an ultra-processed food marketing document. Now, 70% of a child's diet is ultra-processed food. Why does that matter? Because ultra-processed food is a science experiment from scientists that worked for the tobacco industry to make that food ultra palatable. So we have this epidemic where you go to a playground with my 3-year-old, and there's just kids, there's littered with ultra processed food, with all this garbage. They're drinking soda. And then what's happening? The medical community is saying that we need to be giving 6-year-olds Ozempic, right? And they're saying that not wait and see. The guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics is that we should not wait for dietary interventions. We should jam that 6-year-old with Ozempic for the rest of their life at a cost of $1,600 per month forever from the taxpayer. So that's kind of the example of this way we've lost our way. It's a massive, we're not gonna Ozempic our way and jab our way and pill our way into better human capital, better mental health. So there's this vicious circle that I think's been tapped into.
Without question. And if you look at their relationship, or even if I could put on a tin hat for just a moment.
Oh, go ahead.
If you look at which companies own the controlling share of the big ag companies, they happen to be the same companies that own the controlling share of big food companies and the big pharma companies and the big insurance companies. I mean, it's all about money. There's definitely a closed loop here. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. It begins with big ag. We make poisonous, cheap, crappy calories. Big Food picks it up with their team of multidisciplinary scientists to make it last forever on the shelf. Like, that's why in that episode of Walking Dead, food is still on the shelf 5 years later when they're rummaging through a friggin' convenience store. I mean, and it's designed to be highly palatable, so you become addicted and you eat more, and then there's Big Pharma like, amazing, everyone's sick. Let's get you on 12 medications by the time you're 50, and then there's big insurance to capitalize on it, and it just continues. And unfortunately, it is all politics, and they are allowed, enabled, it's facilitated with the way private industry has a revolving door with our government health agencies, and Calley speaks to that better than anyone.
Well, and I'll just say on the political front, I do really think President Trump saw the political opportunity. He's the only politician in America that's accountable to everyone kind of by design and tapped in this and believes in it. I think the problem is, and there is a big problem in the Senate, I mean, there's 5 pharma lobbyists for every senator and member of Congress. The pharmaceutical industry alone and the insurance industry, the healthcare industry combined, spends 5 times more on political donations than any other industry. So I do think you're seeing, and you're going to see this.
Who are your big hopes in the Senate? Who are you pinning your hopes on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely seeing already we're very confident in the confirmation for Bobby, but you're definitely, you know, I've seen it. The senators go into that office. They've completely bankrolled the lobbyists. They bankrolled these senators, and they're looking for ways to cut away at Bobby. I mean, the pro-life groups that are attacking Bobby on abortion are funded by pharma. Mike Pence's group is actually. There's evidence I've seen that they're somewhat funded by pharma. Mike Pence has been heavily funded by pharma, and now he's using the abortion. They're going to use any possible angle. And I'll tell you, being in some of these meetings and seeing some of the arguments from the other stakeholders, they go into that office and they do not debate the fact that kids are getting sick and it's their products profiting and making the kids sick. They are arguing to those senators that's going to cost jobs. They don't even debate the health argument. They've completely conceded that. They've completely conceded that we're the sickest country in the world. They've completely conceded that our food in the United States is less healthy than the same product for every other country. They've conceded, the pharmaceutical industry, that they fundamentally profit from people being sick. They don't reverse disease, they only manage it. They're not debating what Bobby's saying. They're only making the economic argument and looking for any type of wedge. So Bobby's going to get through, but I think that's something we need to understand and why it's so important to empower President Trump in this. The presidency is designed to actually combat the narrow interests of the Senate and Congress, who are absolutely bought off just by definition by the pharmaceutical industry. So I do think we just have to actually really, I believe, just support President Trump in this mission. Who am I hopeful for? I think a lot of Republicans have woken up. Tuberville.
But like, let's name
Tuberville.
Who are your allies?
Roger Marshall, who's a doctor, who's been, very traditional thinking, has talked about being super impacted by MAHA and started the MAHA caucus. Tommy Tuberville has been a conservative, one of the most conservative members, is taking on food dyes. He's saying the exact same thing Bernie Sanders and Gavin Newsom is saying. I mean, you've got
Senator Cory Booker.
And then you've got Democrats.
The Democrats,
you've got Cory Booker. You've got Bernie Sanders, I think, are going to be good allies.
So you see this as an issue where there can be a genuine bipartisan
behind closed doors, there's a lot of Democrats that strongly support what Bobby Kennedy is saying, 100%. I mean, even when you take vaccines.
Let's go there.
It's great.
It's great. Vaccines are great.
The 2 largest vaccine makers in the world are, by definition, just as a demonstrable statement of fact, criminal enterprises. GlaxoSmithKline and Merck have settled over $5 billion in criminal penalties for falsifying research and bribing doctors in the past 5 years. These are vaccine makers. So we can...
I cannot fact check you on stage.
Okay, well...
but let's talk about the bigger Gestalt issue. I think a lot of people are drawn to the MAHA movement and frankly drawn to Bobby Kennedy because they think our kids are sick, we are fat, we are sedentary, something's going wrong. If you look at pictures of beaches, there's these memes,
right,
of an American beach in Los Angeles or Malibu or whatever from the 60s or 70s. Everyone looks svelte and amazing. Take that same picture now, it's wildly different.
Right.
Common sense says something has gone awry and we should do something about it. Where I think people start to look at things a little bit more skeptically is around the issue of vaccines and around the issue of skepticism around vaccines. Because if you just look, again, common sense at the numbers, we live in a country where there's no polio. We live in a country where there's no measles. And these innovations have been essential, life-saving, especially for children. square for me, like contend with that issue for me. I'm sure that you've gotten this question many times before.
I mean, it's 72 interventions for a kid, right? So there's 12 different things. So what Bobby Kennedy is saying, if you ask the country, do you support vaccines? Majority would probably say yes to those polls. If you ask the country, should criminal enterprises be continually subjected to science to make sure they're telling the truth when there's an incentive for them to get their products on a schedule to be mandated for every single American, and we should continue to subject those pharmaceutical products to science and to continue to study them and continue to have transparency in them, 90% of people would say yes. If you actually decipher what Bobby Kennedy has said about vaccines as just a demonstrable statement, he is saying that they should be subjected to science. He is saying pharmaceutical products should be subjected to science. President Trump has declared his intention to investigate why kids are getting sick. As we're all talking about, and so what Casey talks about so eloquently, there's a multifactorial pillars of why we're getting sick, we think. That's food, that's sedentary lifestyle, that's chronic stress, that's circadian rhythm and sleep, and absolutely it's overprescription of pharmaceuticals. It's the fact that we're on 4.6 billion prescriptions a year. And it might be the fact, even taking what you just said, the fact that we've dramatically increased, and there's a massive incentive for criminal enterprises, GlaxoSmithKline and Merck, to get more and more and more vaccines on the schedule. You cannot watch an NFL game without seeing ad after ad after ad for new vaccines with the companies, and I know, not out of goodwill or desire for children's health. They are jamming these things onto the schedule so that the second they're on the schedule, the media, the corporate media that is 50% funded by the pharmaceutical industry calls anyone a war criminal. They are studies that literally have a 3-day window of complications. The studies just foundationally are not, but the second you have a study, you have the media shut down anyone who even asks a question. So I do think the vaccine debate represents to me, and I think we can get beyond this religious issue of it's a blanket immunity and blanket non-questioning 72 shots to actually talk about and be adults in this country, not be infantilized, where we can actually continue to subject every pharmaceutical product to science. I'll just say the last point, that the FDA,
I'm gonna back you up.
At the FDA, getting out of pharmaceuticals just to drugs, 50% of FDA approvals for drugs, that study cannot be replicated. The study cannot be replicated for the drug system that we have right now. Like the science of pharmaceutical products is totally shoddy. So this is a wider issue that I think we can have as adults about subjecting the pharmaceutical industry to continued rigor in science. There would be no reason not to. So that is what Bobby's saying.
Jillian, go ahead.
Okay, so first, I just want to take one step back and say so much of the things that Calley and Vani are bringing up are illegal in most of the developed world. You're not allowed to have pharmaceutical advertisements on TV, I think with the exception of New Zealand.
Right.
That's about it, for a reason, because they're buying the narrative. The ways that they lobby and essentially buy off the politicians, also illegal in most other countries of the developed world, if not all, I think. So that should be your first indication that there's an issue here. Now, with that said, let's look at how we got to 72 shots and what actually are they. Well, in 1986, the Reagan administration granted the pharmaceutical companies blanket immunity, and subsequently, you got that many more doses of vaccines on the schedule because there are no downstream consequences. Now, ask yourself this. Let's look at hepatitis B. Nobody's arguing about polio and measles right now. I am not a PhD. I strongly suggest you speak to some who could make a far more educated case on the science. That said, I'm vaccinated, my kids are vaccinated. Hepatitis B, wish we didn't have to do that one. What is it? Well, it's a sexually transmitted disease that you get from risky unprotected sex and needles. Does a newborn need that on their second day of life? Well, mom could have it. Well, can you test the mother? Well, yeah. So then why are you giving it to my kid outside of the fact that it's $1 billion business for you now?
And it's not given in Japan and many countries in Europe.
Again,
so we can't question that.
Right, or 18 of those shots are COVID shots. We know kids don't need a COVID shot.
That's mandated now for 6-month-olds.
This is what we're talking about.
And I think there's a wide milieu, and I think there's many areas Bobby can focus on. But if you're going to ask about it, I do think there's this Pandora's box with the vaccine debate, and I think it represents a lot of what you're seeing, and what we've seen with censorship in general. Why are parents war criminals for asking questions about immune system changing shots that they're giving their kids? Why is the media and all these corrupt, rancid government organizations bashing mothers?
I'm not corrupt and rancid, and I'm saying there is a world of difference between talking about the Hep B vaccine and reviving arguments, let's say, that vaccines cause autism. Or do you see it?
This is where you really-
we should. What causes autism?
Well, okay, I was gonna say this is highly debatable, and this is where you need qualified MDs and PhDs to have this conversation with you. But let's go back to hepatitis. Exactly, Doc. I was like, Doc, you want to jump in here?
He does not want to.
With that said, let's just look at Hep B for one more moment. When I was asking, like, what is the robust data they're doing on these vaccines? Let me look into it myself. You can do this on your own right now. You go to the FDA's website for vaccines licensed for use in America. Great. Go to Recumbivax HB. That's one of the Hep B vaccines. You go into like package insert, check section 6.1, and it will tell you exactly what Calley just said. I think it was like 434 doses to 140 something kids, and they monitored them after injection for 5 days. Now, do they go back and see if the antibody's there and if it's still efficacious? Sure. Is that robust to you? By the way, there's no placebo group. Do we know what's creating the rise in autism? No. There are so many different things wrong, from crap in the air, crap in the food, all the pharmaceuticals, but it definitely is a question. And I have, believe me, I worked on a show called The Doctors, and all of those doctors back in the day were like, this is nonsense, this is crazy. And then subsequently began to speak to people on the side who have suggested that hitting kids with all of these things so early into life is certainly not optimal. Like,
but what would a message sound like to the public, right? We need to, yeah, go ahead.
President Trump is going to figure out why kids are getting sick. There's the callousness from the media and medical elites about just like dismissing questions about autism. We don't know what causes autism.
No, we don't.
And President Trump has said, we are going to study. Now, this is we got a microbiome expert here, one of the top, a hero of the movement who can speak to this much better, probably doesn't want to right now on this particular but my high level common sense is that there is a lot of research showing that autism is tied to the microbiome and gut dysfunction. And we have an all-out nuclear war right now in our child's microbiomes with the pesticides, with the fact that there's so much artificial light, their phones, that actually very much disrupts your hormones. And yes, with the overproliferation of pharmaceuticals, which absolutely have a massive impact on the microbiome. So to say that this complex milieu of issues that are impacting our child's gut, to take anything off the table there is scientifically flagrantly inaccurate. And the message that I think really has resonated, and I do think vaccines are a hot topic and is worth talking about, but it's one, for me, one factor of many others that are impacting our metabolic health, is that why can't we ask questions? And what President Trump, and I think the great spirit and great opportunity of MAHA is figuring out what the hell is going on. Right now, 80% of the NIH goes to pharmaceutical R&D. We're going to unbundle that and get to just asking the taboo. We should be asking the taboo questions.
So we've been talking about food. We've been talking about pharma. What are the other pillars of the the MAHA movement? Environments. Like what are the other key priorities that you think this administration should be talking about and tackling in the first 100 days? Vani.
Yeah, I mean, we have a problem with microplastics in our food. You know, we have a credit card size shape of plastics in our bodies right now.
It's insane.
And when we look at those forever chemicals that are in our body and how they affect our rising rates of cancer and disease, I mean, that is a fundamental issue in terms of the mass poisoning of our bodies and what we can do there. And so that is an issue I know that needs to be addressed and handled. I also think there's this overwhelming sense that we need transparency and we need truth to come out. And I think a lot about what's happening with this movement, how we're able to educate people about these topics in a new way that's never been done. Now the mainstream media is coming alive and wanting to talk about these issues and have a voice like mine back on, which I was for so many years censored. And you too, right?
I got kicked off of TikTok for one reel about a doctor talking about ivermectin and a hypothesis as to why it might mitigate the severity of your COVID case. Like, it's bananas what has happened.
And I think that's the piece of the censorship and the lack of transparency about our drugs, about the vaccines, about our food that has driven everyone to kind of come together and say, we've had enough. We want truth. We want transparency. And we want to be able to educate people in a way that isn't being funded by big industry, right? And so this is why the free press is so beautiful, right? And yes. Clap it up, guys.
I am the big pharma to her FDA, and I just made her to say that. Okay, but let's take a step back for a second. The actual things that you like. Okay, here maybe I'll put it this way. I feel like you, Jillian Michaels, have spent your entire career trying to sort of sway culture toward these conclusions. Maybe you weren't talking about red dye or microplastics, but
I talked about it in a book 15 years ago.
But eating organic, but being
gone nowhere,
right? And so then there's there's cultural suasion and influence, which is you guys have really been in the business of that. And then there's like the strong arm of government. Where's and generally conservatives don't love, Calley, the strong arm of government. Where's the line? Like, where are the places where the government should be banning, interceding, outlawing? Like, give us some rules for the road.
Not a lot of bans to start. The two pillars of MAHA are stop recommending poisonous crap and stop subsidizing it. So let's just take pharmaceutical products, right?
So I should be able to buy Fruit Loops, but they shouldn't be subsidized.
Well, we have this is getting into the weeds there. We have GRAS standards with the FDA
Okay, don't get into the weeds on Fruit Loops.
The FDA recently said that they actually don't know all the chemicals in our food. We actually have a situation where it's self-policing. So we actually don't even know what are in the Fruit Loops. They don't even have to label them in the United States. We have full corporate capture.
Just the ingredient, a side note, just the ingredient natural flavor, when you see that on a label, it can mean up to 1,000 different chemicals. And those are the chemicals that are engineering your brain to like that flavor and create that addictive flavor, right? So it's a complete lack of transparency about what's really happening to our food. Go ahead.
But so let's get to your point about the nanny state and conservatives embracing this. So when I was a lobbyist 15 years
you get where I'm going.
I totally get where you're going. It's what I'm most passionate about describing, and I think conservatives have really learned this. Fixing the free market, correcting corruption, addressing corruption is not an attack on the free market. It is an imperative for the free market. When I was a lobbyist 15 years ago, we used to go and pay conservative think tanks to say that it was nanny state to take soda off of food stamps. But the soda companies were lobbying tens of millions of dollars to get the soda on food stamps. So actually saying, should the government be funding diabetes water to addict kids to and then give them a diabetes to where Medicaid right now for lower income kids is more expensive than the entire defense and intelligence budget and growing 2 times faster? Is that saying conservative public policy? No, it's not. Actually, it's an imperative for the free market to say we're not going to poison our children with supplemental nutrition programs. So that's the framework. When we talk about the biggest elephant in the room, which is our $4.5 trillion healthcare budget, that is dictated by the American Medical Association, which is by definition a pharmaceutical lobbying group that has the judgment to have no age limit right now for gender transition surgery. That is the group that we have outsourced 20% of the U.S. economy to. Whenever anyone in this room goes to a doctor, they are subject to the American Medical Association algorithms, which underpin Medicare, Medicaid through totally administratively decision, like we just thrown it out to them, and then all private insurance. So what Bobby and Trump are saying is it's actually imperative. It's imperative for a free market. It's imperative for human capital that we take our medical logic away from this top-down system. It's a top-down system, and give people choice. I mean, this idea of medical freedom and this idea of patients working with their doctors on their complex interpersonal issue and then working with that doctor to figure out a solution for them, that's not going to be Ozempic for every 6-year-old. That should be using the medical dollars for what Chris Palmer talks about of food or supplementation or incentivizing exercise. You know, in Europe, in Denmark, if you're obese, you do not get Ozempic. They're making 90% of their profits, their biggest company, from the United States. You get an insurance-subsidized keto diet. You get insurance-subsidized exercise. Maybe Ozempic if you're old and morbidly obese and diabetic, maybe. But that's not the first line of defense. It's more flexible. So that's the public policy imperative for MAHA. It's 2 parts. Let's get Americans the truth so they can make informed consent. We do not have the truth right now. We do not have full information. And then free up flexibility, get out of the stranglehold of the American Medical Association codes and allow patients to have flexibility with their doctor.
And I think the only way to get to truth is what Jillian said, which is we have to get the pharmaceutical funding out of the media.
And no one's trying to ban.
So should Pfizer not be allowed to buy ads on CNN?
Exactly, but they will be, arguably. Calley and I have had a conversation about this recently because of the First Amendment. You kind of don't want to mess with that, so it's very sticky. With that said, what would be banned? Well, let's look at the argument that Vani has put front and center with regard to sugar cereal. What if it was just sugar and not high fructose corn syrup from genetically engineered crops that are sprayed with a million different chemicals? What if she could just do that for you with your Fruit Loops to make it that much easier for the average American not to have to worry about their toxic load? That's the kind of stuff that people, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Vani is trying to facilitate. So it's not about taking your cereal away, it's about making it significantly less poisonous. I, of course, would love for you to have eggs, as I think we all would at the table. Yeah. But that's the conversation. What I find even more interesting is we're so worried about everybody banning McDonald's, but we don't want to give moms a choice about the hepatitis B vaccine for their newborn. Just saying. And I do think, not to circle back, but I can't help myself, that vaccine conversation is a bit of a red herring to distract you. Kennedy has never said he's taking away your measles vaccine. That's not true. He said he wants to make sure that they are as safe as possible for kids. So we talk about, oh God, don't take my McDonald's, but mom should not have a say about this. It's like,
there's a way to do, so processed foods are not going to go away, right?
I guess the difference, Jillian, between vaccines and your decision to eat Fruit Loops is vaccines, let's say, against one we would all agree is essential, polio.
But no one's talking
But hold on, but the difference is it relies on herd immunity. It relies on us making a collective choice in a way that few other public health issues do. That's why it's such a different
But this is
issue.
why you go case by case.
But Kate, you can't just lump all vaccines into one thing. You can't do.
No, I'm just making a categorical difference of why I don't think it's a red herring to talk about because. Well, okay.
Well, to say Kennedy was responsible for Samoa, no, he wasn't. What ended up happening in 2018 is that 2 kids died from an MMR vaccine that was improperly prepared, and that's exactly the kind of stuff he's advocating to prevent forever. He was out there in 2019. He had no direct connection to that incident whatsoever, and yet was smeared with it.
And let's be very clear. Very clear. Bobby Kennedy is not responsible for the lack of faith of our public health authorities. The public health authorities are responsible for that.
Let's talk about mental health for a minute. Last year, 40% of high school students in this country, 40% said they frequently felt sad, like crippling despair or hopelessness, and 20% said they seriously considered suicide. What is the relationship between the issues we've been talking about, diet, environment, exercise, and mental health? And Jillian, let's start with you.
I mean, I was that kid. So I can speak to it personally. I was probably 170 pounds by the time I was 13 years old. Severe ADD, polycystic ovarian syndrome that I ended up discovering when I was 15 because I was still eating garbage even though I had gotten into martial arts and was gradually losing the weight. So having been that kid, there's no question that this garbage food absolutely contributes to it. And again, this is where Dr. Palmer could speak to it so much more eloquently than I can because that's what he does for a living.
And Nina.
Of course. But with that said, I can speak from personal experience. And then I was fortunate enough to get into martial arts, be educated, be empowered, and reclaim my health over time. Vani has a very similar story. She was just a little bit older than I was, and unfortunately had to hit that rock bottom to make that change. There was, I was intercepted earlier. Fortunately, there was an intervention when I was at a younger age, but there's no question that this crap is playing a role. No question.
I mean, it's unacceptable that when I went to my doctor with a problem at work where I had a harassing boss, that they put me on Ambien, Cymbalta, and Xanax. Instead of saying, hey, you're young, why don't you just quit your job, right? like what the, right? Like, why are we putting our people in that position, right? Like, why don't you quit your job, meditate, have some yoga, go work out? You're young, you'll go find something, right? Like, you don't belong in this position. And we're not empowering our doctors and our medical community to handle this subject in the right way, which is through root cause, intervention and why you see the rise of functional medicine doctors and why that's so important for the future of this country. And I'm so grateful for people like, Dr. Palmer here. And
okay, let's go to this Dr. Palmer.
He's amazing. This is incredible.
He's written this seminal book on how depression, mental health disorders and brain disorders, he can say it much better, but is tied to not a drug deficiencies. 25% of women are on some kind of psychiatric drug right now, but it is actually tied to our underlying metabolic health. It's all connected, obviously.
I mean, I'm thinking about the combo you just laid out. Like, you must have been catatonic.
I mean, you have no idea. And thank goodness I was able to get off, right? And the only way was through an amazing integrative psychiatrist who also practiced acupuncture and got me off of all that stuff, right? And it's like, why aren't we looking at these other modalities on how to save us, right?
Speaking of psychedelics is something we have not mentioned in this conversation. Really interesting, like the way that that's coming up on the right and the left. Where do you guys stand on psychedelics? Where's the MAHA movement?
Well, I'll tell you why I'm not speaking.
And like, what are you on right now?
I can tell you I'm on nothing, and I judge everyone in this room for what they do. So that's my stance.
We have a situation right now where we have a mental health crisis, and it's a societal dynamic that 25% of women and a large percentage of the American people are on drugs that essentially are numbing us out from reality, as Vani's talking about. I mean, this is a real societal problem. And I think really from a public policy perspective, if you really decipher what the MAHA movement's saying, it's like we got to get to the root cause. And the root cause of our mental health crisis is not a SSRI deficiency. It's the fact that we're not in the sun. It's the fact that we're not moving. It's the fact that there's a trauma crisis right now in this country that we're not really grappling with. So
a trauma crisis?
A trauma crisis, absolutely. I think we're committing mass trauma to children right now with what we're feeding them, with our culture, with our smartphones. Think about a child, just the evolutionary, like, unprecedented forces that are, like, just tormenting their psyche right now. So it's not all bad, right? I'm happy to be living in this time, but it's a crazy environment of just unprecedented forces against a child's mental health and metabolic health. So what psychedelics represent, I mean, personally speaking, Casey and I have talked about this. Our experience with psychedelics after my mom died is, I mean, the most impactful moment of my life, and I attribute, responsible for a lot of what I'm doing, and has been one of the most positive experiences ever. I think it does represent a modality that gets to somewhat of a root cause, because instead of numbing yourself, you're able to potentially, I think with the right integration, right therapy, with it appropriately done, able to get to a spot where you're actually able to form new pathways and actually potentially readdress some of the ingrained trauma that we all face. So I mean, I think it's a very promising therapeutic. Much wider, we should be aggressively investing in what Dr. Palmer is talking about understanding the links between the microbiome and our underlying metabolic health and mental health. We should be investing in therapeutics that I've never met a veteran that suffers from PTSD that hasn't gone through appropriate psychedelic therapy that said it wasn't the most impactful experience of their lives. We should be taking that seriously, not having the FDA, which is totally an orgy of corruption with SSRI makers, say that psychedelics are too dangerous and slow that progress. So what MAHA represents is we should be doing everything. We've got a crisis. We can't get worse than where we are right now. We need to be going to much more personalized therapies, much bolder therapies, much more root cause therapies. That's what it represents to me.
Can I speak with on this topic with regard to obesity? So people love to tell you diet and exercise don't work. Well, they do work. It's physics. It's the first law of thermodynamics, energy in, energy out. That said, a large amount of the people that lose weight can't keep it off, 95%. In fact, so now you got to ask the bigger question, why? So of course we can look at the fact that the food is designed to be physically addictive. There's no question that your biology is being hijacked, but your psychology is also being exploited. Everybody that I worked with who was not 20 pounds overweight, we're talking about 50 pounds, 100 pounds overweight, had trauma. And I'll give you examples. So Dr. Phil once said this, and I remember thinking he was such a jerk back in the day, and then I understood completely. You're fat because you want to be fat. And what that means is that the food or the weight is providing you with something so psychologically significant that at one time or another, it meant your psychological survival. If you were molested, if you were incested, and you desexualized by gaining weight, That's one example. I worked with a kid who would eat with his mother. And when he lost weight, she would withdraw and become depressed. So of course, losing the food represented a primal abandonment. I could go on and on and on. So I spoke with Matt Johnston, who is an incredible researcher with psilocybin in particular, but utilizing therapeutics to treat addiction. And I asked him, I was like, Matt, what? One session of psilocybin, 85% smoking cessation rate, incredible science there. I was like, can you use this for people who are morbidly obese to treat those traumas, to get to the bottom of it, to deal with the deeper issues? And the thing is, it's not legal. He's like, I'd have to get a study funded. Like, we don't know yet, but it sure seems like, yeah, it would help a lot. There are no side effects to psilocybin. There are a lot of side effects to Ozempic, girl, which we'll talk about later.
We're gonna talk about that on the
We'll talk
side.
about that later, okay? So
I need to tell you what happened to my dad.
Okay, you're gonna tell me.
Yeah.
Guys, one thing I've been thinking about as you're on stage, and it's like, you've all been in the counterculture position. You're now moving like firmly into not the counterculture, but the culture. How do you foresee that changing you? Because it's a really profound thing, I think, to go from the sort of gadfly or outcast position, looking inside the window, to actually making policy. And the other part of that question, I guess, is if you're asked to serve in this administration, would you say yes? Calley?
Calley is the administrator.
So yes or no, would you?
No, I'm not serving right now. So
If asked, would you?
If Bobby or the president called and said I had to do something, I'm not planning to do anything right now, and I'm going to be I'm trying to be an ally, and we all are, to Bobby and Trump. I mean, the answer to your question, I'm not serving, and I think we have a mass opportunity and a really a risk and an opportunity where we need to solidify the MAHA movement. It's not solidified. I don't think we're solidified in the culture yet. I think Bobby has tapped into light, and President Trump has tapped into light, and we need all hands on deck from the outside. Independent press, holding them to account, but also, talking about the corruption that's standing in the way, celebrating wins that are unimpeachable, like getting our food healthier. We have this tools, I think, that we've never had on behalf of kids, where we have we have Joe Rogan, we have Andrew Huberman, we have Megyn Kelly, we have the independent media, which now has more eyeballs than the traditional media, that cares about this issue, that's shining a light on, that's not subject of pharma. And I think, we need to just show President Trump and Bobby just continued wins and momentum. I believe that if I want to change healthcare to a more preventative form, and I think the way we do that is we help President Trump. We help Republicans, to be totally candid, have MAHA help them in the midterms. Because if this is an enduring political coalition, as you said, I think it is one of the most powerful coalitions in the country right now, you've actually changed the window of health. I was speaking to a dean of a top med school recently, and he was saying that professors are kicking and screaming that the NIH is going to have more preventative focused research. But in 4 years, it's going to be the norm. Like, that's how you change culture. It's what's happening with Mark Zuckerberg. Who knows what his motivations are? But like,
do you care, though?
I don't care. I don't care. I don't care that every single professor at Harvard Med School thinks that Bobby Kennedy is a complete wacko, buffoon, anti-vax idiot. I don't care. They're going to have to change their incentives, because $50 billion of annual NIH money is going to change at his directive. And that's going to change culture over time. And in 4 years, it's going to be the norm. Right. So if we can keep this coalition alive, anyway. So I think that's what we're all really.
So what I'm hearing is a yes, that if asked you would. Vani?
Yeah, I don't like having a boss, so
I cannot imagine you having a boss. I will say.
So I know. I think my power is greater on the outside.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth. And I see that I'm giving a voice to so many moms out there and so many Americans out there that have felt this incredible passion about cleaning up the food supply and really addressing the root cause of why our food is so sick. And so I want to continue that work.
And who's in the group chat? Is it you guys and Bobby and Trump? Like, who's in it? Like, who's the core?
We've got there's I think a natural funnel right now to the, Marty McCary, the new FDA chief, testified with us at the Senate. I mean, I think there's a real closeness between the advocates and the people going in, just demonstrably. You can see that. And I think there's a real power of, Alex Clark and so many others, being tied into what's happening in the administration.
And let's just talk about that for a minute. When we were all at the Senate together giving our testimony, It was 4 hours of beautiful discussion on how to save humanity, not one political talking point, okay? And it brought us together in a way that really just electrified the MAHA movement, and it was a catalyst. And it's all of us and our expertises that are coming together, and that's what's unstoppable, is we all have a unique perspective to bring, and we all have our expertise, and then together we're able to handle these issues in such a way that is the most powerful in terms of impacting the American
But when we look back,
population.
do you guys remember when Michelle Obama was
Right.
in the White House?
Right.
Seems like 100 million years ago. Her big issue was childhood health.
Yeah.
Let's move, okay?
Yeah.
Let's move.
Well, this is, I mean,
And
this
the
is-
garden
Well,
and the Alice Waters. Like,
It became,
why did none of that work?
It became because of Let's Move. It
Yes.
became
Yeah.
Let's Move because
Yes.
the food industry got to her within a year, and she changed the health eating to Let's Move.
Now,
as we all
came
agree,
from food to
yeah.
exercise, and that was funded by Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they also
they
funded
funded it.
Harvard researchers to move it that way too, saying exercise is more important than the sugary drinks.
And
right?
Teresa Heinz Carey and Obama's Secretary of State pressured her. So, yeah. Heinz.
You know that?
Yes.
You know that?
That's my scuttlebutt.
Okay. Well, okay, we're going to have to submit this to rigorous reporting.
All right.
I want to do a quick lightning round because I know you guys have to go to a brunch that will not have any seed oils in it.
That's right.
I want to read off some things I'm seeing MAHA influencers doing, and I want you to tell me your quick lightning round thoughts. Jillian, reverse osmosis water filters, yay or nay?
Yeah,
Really?
absolutely.
They're great.
Water's
Okay.
poison.
Yeah.
Yes.
Water's poison. Wow. Okay.
The water's
Well,
poison.
it's just got.
My toilet water is filtered, okay?
What?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
my
it-
whole house is filtered, so everything is
Yeah.
filtered. Yes.
So if I go in New York City, and I do this every day, I'm realizing you guys probably think I'm like a toxic waste dump. I thought drinking water was good. You're saying when I turn
No.
on the tap and drink water, it's bad.
That's worse.
Depends where you
That's
live.
worse.
That's worse than probably drinking water, than drinking tap water. Tap water is really problematic.
Wow. Okay.
Do you trust the government on other things?
Vani, sauna and cold plunge.
Love it.
Love it. Getting off hormonal birth control, Calley.
No.
Calley.
No.
It's a fun one for Calley. Jillian, Alex, Clark, no-brainer. Okay, I'll ask Jillian.
This Getty is a question for Callie's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Casey means she's got some musings
Okay.
on this subject matter, and you really should be speaking
Well, it's
to
a
the
huge,
appropriate MD.
I will
on
say
it.
it's a huge,
We should be
huge
able to ask
trend.
questions.
Yeah.
Eating your own placenta.
No,
Oh.
no. Do you do it?
50-50.
Leslie did.
I'm gonna say no. I wrote a whole book about this with 5 different doctors, and the answer was absolutely not.
My wife's saying yes. She did it.
No.
Yes?
No.
Wow. Okay, we're going to
Well,
discuss
you
this.
can like
Research
a
is
pill,
not
like
there
a
on
pill.
The
that one.
idea that is not weird and me drinking tap water
No.
is okay.
I'm gonna say I'll take a hard no on
Calley,
it.
raw milk.
Oh, big time. Yes. I mean, it's just insane. Alex, amazing podcast talking about raw milk farms. Yes.
Okay, Vani.
Why? Sorry.
No.
Okay.
Lightning round.
All right.
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
Vani. Ditching AirPods for wired headphones.
You're electrifying your brain. Why would you do that? Like, why would you do that?
AirPods are bad.
I mean, AirPods are awful. Like,
Really?
why would you do that to your brain? Get them out of your ears.
Wow. Okay. I'm not even going to say reverse osmosis water filters because I know how you guys feel about that. Grounding, which is standing in the soil with bare feet.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Why not? Yeah, there's great microbes in the soil. It's good for
Okay,
everybody,
what
you
is the weirdest thing each of you does when it comes to health? The things that's like the most tinfoil hat, the most out there. Jillian?
I go down. I've gotten a little Brian Johnson. I don't know if you're familiar.
Of course, I just had him on the podcast. Don't die.
I personally like him a lot, and he's not advocating for everybody to replace all the plasma in their body, but I find it fascinating to watch him go edit his genome, and then I just sit back. I'm like, is he going to die or not? You know,
He is gonna die.
but not for a long time. I think. Anyway, I think that some of the stuff he's doing is really cool. So, but I don't recommend this to anyone. I just got this. Oh my God, this thing called cerebral lysine from Austria. And it's a peptide to enhance cognitive performance. And like I illegally shipped it into the, can you think you can pull some strings now that I've said that on camera? It's like a horse needle this big. And I learned about it from Brian. And
Is this
I will tell
natural
you,
Ozempic?
Not even remotely, no. It's actually
I'm
made
hearing
from,
peptide, I'm hearing needles, I'm hearing illegal.
No, it's actually made from pig brains. And I have
Wow,
I can
Jillian.
hear me out on this. I did a lot of homework on it first. It's legal in most other parts of the developed world, of course, and they use it for people with Alzheimer's, stroke victims. It has worked unbelievably on my ADD. And then our dear friend Brigham Bueller, I'm actually going to see him today to do my first stem cell exosome thing. He's the most incredible. His doctor, Dr. Rexford, is one of the most amazing clinicians. I've never had anybody analyze my blood the way she has. So I'm really getting into the nitty gritty. And I don't recommend that. This is just stuff that I'm doing for myself. And if I grow a third nipple or a horn, you'll know it went wrong somewhere.
Vani, weirdest thing you do?
Never use a microwave. Never.
Calley?
I'm getting a red light therapy. I think there's a lot of actually power behind it.
Okay, quick one-word answers, and this will close it out. One-word answers, okay? Calley, Coca-Cola is?
A for-profit company.
Vani, Fauci is?
The devil.
Wow. Jillian, the COVID vaccine?
You mean the COVID shot?
Yeah.
I think I can be done there.
Okay.
COVID shot.
Jay Bhattacharya, Calley.
Hero.
Marty Macri, Macari, I never know how to say his last name.
So loving.
Fluoride, Jillian.
I've not personally done a ton of homework on this, but what I can say is,
One word.
speaking to, God damn it, dental professionals, topical hydroxyapatite seems to be the way to go. Why risk it?
Voluntary.
Thing you are most hopeful for in this new administration, each one of you.
Spiritual awakening.
Vani?
We're going up against the bad guys and we're going to win.
Change, positive change, baby step change, any kind of change.
Jillian Michaels, Vani, Calley, thank you so much for joining me on Honestly.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Really
Finally.
fun. So much